Productive week, although stormy week. There's always fireworks on deadline week, but we got a lot of work done. Today I got merit protection bill to get through that was a huge piece of work that Mike Osborne and the House side and I've been working on for quite some time now. And I want to thank Mike, but also want to thank staff on our side and the governor's staff for doing the work, the hard work, and Sterling Zierle too with the Oklahoma Public Employees Association. He's been awesome to work with to modernize Oklahoma's employment system, or merit system. And so there's many other successes, many fireworks. I'm sure you have questions and things that you may want to talk about, but I want you all to ask any question you want to now.
Start with Old Classic. How are things going with Speaker McCall and your discussions? When's the last time you two gentlemen sat down together or got on the phone together?
We were on the phone together last evening, and last time we were physically together was probably Tuesday, but had pleasant conversations both times.
What, any progress in coming together on this? I guess it was originally 1236 and now 1237 sent back over. You guys had some disagreement. They want a judicial review component, I think is the term, and then you wanted to fund a unit in the Attorney General's office. Where are we now a few days later?
Well, the normal way of dealing with that would be to reject Senate amendments on 1236, send it to conference, and try to work out differences. They chose to suspend rules and introduce three vehicles, 1237, 1238, and 1239, and I think their original intent, from what I understand, was to run the same bill 3 days in a row, but they decided not to do that after a day. I don't know why. But the 1237 is dormant before it even got started. It's violative of our rules to even take it up this session. It would be eligible next session. We're not going to suspend rules to hear a gamesmanship type bill. 1236 is still a live vehicle. 1236 came over in an unconstitutional fashion where it was a clear violation of separation of powers and a clear a nullification bill, really. And so, you know my stance on nullification. I've been pretty consistent on that over the last 5 years. It's an ineffective strategy. It has been, I used to say since 1834, but I found a case in 1793 doing my research this week. So since 1793, it's been a failed attempt. There are ways that we can do it. The Attorney General plays a key role. I have not seen the language they put in 1237 yet, but 1236 is the vehicle. If anyone wishes to push back on federal overreach, the vehicle's alive. We'll send it back, send it in an overwhelming fashion, and I assume from the comments I've seen they won't just accept Senate amendments, although they should. It's a great bill. And then we'll go to conference if they so desire.
I get voicemails like that sometimes, and emails like that sometimes, but I'm sure you got a lot this week.
Yeah.
You and Doug Spencer seem to work things out. How did that happen?
Don Spencer's issued a couple of public apologies. I haven't talked to him.
So you had nothing to do with it? You didn't ask him to issue a public apology or anything like that?
No.
Barbara has a question. Let me check the volume here. Barbara, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Jim, thanks again for doing this. The question I had about the transgender student athlete bills coming over, Senate Bill 2, is that something the Senate is going to hear?
Yeah, we've been focused on doing, I think Aaron hopefully muted me. We've been focused on getting through the House bills this week. I'm aware, I've read the articles on SB2 and what happened over there, but we haven't had those discussions in our caucus yet, and we've got until the end of session to make decisions on those.
Can I ask you about Senate Bill, I think it's 131, and that's what the governor's office has termed socialized health care that moved out of the House this week. At least he said Republicans have voted for socialized health care. Where does the Senate stand on that? managed care. Do you still, early on, I think there was a lot of support for the governor's measure. Where does your caucus stand on that now?
You know, there's mixed feelings within the caucus, but the governor made a strong statement about single-payer health care, and we're going to look at the bills that came back. I think you said 131. I think that's right. That was done without any input from the Senate, and so it doesn't look like their original attempts at pushing back against the governor's plan. It looks like a new plan that's been hatched to try to erode support for the governor's deal. But I'll have to take a look at it. I have spoken to the governor about his position on it and understand his perspective. I have.
You've had a few months to think over the governor's proposal for managed care. I mean, do you support what the governor is proposing?
So I support innovation in the health sector. My caucus, you know, Trace makes fun of me, but I always say I'm speaking for myself or my caucus, you know, Senate District 47 or the caucus. And on this issue, talking for the caucus, it's a mixed bag. Talking for myself, I'm all for innovation. The risk corridors always caused me some concern, but I've had very productive conversations with Kevin Corbett and his team on doing that the first year. Anything that drives down ER visits, drives up efficiency, I'm going to be supportive of. I applaud the governor's efforts on it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about the risk corridor, and you said that they're going to do that in the first year of the plan?
That is the way it's enunciated to me. So the risk corridor is really what caught my attention to cause me not to be an enthusiastic cheerleader at first. It's the same thing that when I was working for Dr. Coburn, we pointed out on
comes to budget, there's a 50-50 split of that overage.
yes, and then there's also on the flip side of that coin, there's a 50-50 split of savings that are more than expected. But what I would like to see is a more aggressive split for the private insurance companies if this continues to go into action, that they carry more of the burden because they're going to be the ones that can actually drive down the utilization.
Got a question from Dylan. Go ahead, Dylan.
I'll go ahead. I don't know if somebody's talking in the room, sorry for getting feedback, but it's good now. But this is Dylan, if you can hear us over at I had two for you. One, I wondered if you could repeat your answer on Senate Bill 2, whether you think it'll get heard. And then, secondly, I'm not sure if you answered this either, but the Medicaid proposal, do you think that'll get heard?
So Dylan, I'm sorry, Aaron and I were talking. He said if I just talked into these mics on my tie, apparently you can hear me. So will you repeat your question? I apologize.
Go ahead and say it one more time.
Dylan, I'm having some difficulties on my mic apparently, so can you repeat your question? I did not hear it all.
Sorry, yes. And my questions are basically because I have trouble hearing you too. But one was on Senate Bill 2, do you expect that to get heard in the Senate? And then on the Medicaid proposal that the House passed, any thoughts on either? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. The Senate Bill 2, as I explained, and I think my mic wasn't picking up with you, I apologize. We've been so focused on the House bills, getting them off the floor. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the way they amended those. I've obviously read and heard what happened on Senate Bill 2, but I haven't looked into the nuts and bolts of the language and all of that. So we'll be having until the end of session to decide what to do on that. And then on the Medicaid I guess it's not really Medicaid expansion, the disallowing private managed care organizations That the answer is the same. I'm waiting to get the language, look at it. We were not consulted on either one of those. It was just action from the House, and we'll look at it and have until the end of session to make decisions on both of those.
Can I ask you about a couple of budget-related matters? And I have talked to Senator Thompson, and I've published some of his remarks, but he did make clear, and I don't make fun of you for it, but he did make clear he was speaking for himself on the education funding question. On the education budget specifically, there seems to be a bit of a preference. The House has articulated they want to raise and increase it at least $135 million to 1017. Senator Thompson said he's concerned about the reform that was recently passed and how that plays out for small schools, rural schools. And then also on the film tax credit, there seems to be some disagreement back and forth on that. What can you say about those two budget debates?
So Senator Thompson does an excellent job enunciating the Senate position, and he also is in daily conversations with me about where we're at as a body. So whatever he has told you is the gospel, but also you've got some of the rub points down right. I mean, those are some of the areas that we're still looking at. The $135 million on Common Ed, I've been asking questions. What does that mean? Like, why are some in the education community balking at that? What does the class size mean? Because the class size really is, I think, contained to kindergarten and first grade on that level. And what does that mean? How many teachers? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have enough teachers' aides? All the practical questions that you would expect someone like me that likes to get in the weeds to ask, I've been asking, and still gathering information on that. And the film credit, there's been a difference on some money, 50 versus 20, in some of the public conversations as well. And so we'll see where that lands.
Response to what Senator Thompson said in one of that, they feel like if there's $50 million to put to a rebate like that, they were interested in tax relief, and you said clearly that the corporate income tax is not an appetite for it in your caucus. But what about the individual, which last I heard you speak about it, you said there's still some conversation? Yeah,
still very open to that conversation. Just want to make sure that we know what we're getting into. Any state, any business, any venture, any family budget, if they can tell you what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years in this COVID environment, they're lying to you. And so if they tell you they can predict it, we can predict it pretty well, but there's a lot of unknowns in the economy right now with all the federal money that's flowed through to local government, state government, and to individuals. That's unsustainable over the long course. And I want to make sure that the revenue picture we're seeing, while it looks really, really good, we've got to look 5 years down the road and 3 years down the road to make sure that if we cut revenue, that we have a plan to fully fund those education initiatives that they're talking about, to fully fund roads and bridges, to fully fund the Medicaid expansion, to fully fund just the ongoing state pensions, all of those things that are ongoing expenses year over year. We've got to make sure that we're looking at the long game and not just the fact that short term we've got $1 billion in excess. The $1 billion in excess is derived in some part to a rebounding economy, but it's also derived somewhat to cutting deeper last year and to federal funds that are flowing through in the form of unemployment checks, stimulus checks, federal funds to state and local governments. And I want to make sure that when we make a decision going out of this session that we're putting ourselves on the best course for success we can.
And I just want to clarify, give you a chance to clarify, because I'm not trying to, I don't want to get wrong what you're saying. The House seemed to make the case that it implied that they're trying to tie the film rebate to the request for tax relief for individuals. Is that your understanding of the negotiations, or are those just two things where there's open question on both?
I'm not in the negotiating room every day, so I don't know exactly what they've said. But I don't tie unrelated issues together. That happens way too often in this building, and I've enunciated my desire to get away from that let's let things stand on their own merit. We'll have a conversation on film, we'll have a conversation on income tax, we'll have a conversation on the funding for schools, we'll have a conversation on how do we pay for roads and bridges. Those should all be separate conversations. There's a reason the single subject exists in the Constitution, although it's been misused over the years. There is a good reason for it, that we don't tie unrelated issues together to get to the finish line.
You mentioned roads and bridges. I'm not sure I know that conversation. What is the debate on that right now? How do you fund that?
It's an ongoing, every year we have that discussion. Last year we had bonds to get there. This year the discussion is different, but every year roads and bridges is a huge part of the discussion, because when you look at the off-the-top money that since Republicans have been in charge, really since took over the House in 2004, we've really dedicated historic levels to roads and bridges. And that's always a discussion, because when you're talking to educators and to healthcare, they say, hey, that's on this trajectory and we've been on this trajectory. When you look at the total dollars, it still pales in comparison. But I'm just using that as a reference point. There's no particular insight that I'm talking about.
Was there, obviously Don Spencer was calling for you to be removed from your position, and now he's backed off that. Was there any attempt within the Republican caucus in the Senate to remove you from your position or elect a new leader or anything that?
No.
I figured not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That message you played earlier, what legislation was that in regard to? Was that
1236.
The governor has already acted on about 145 measures, whack on about 45 today, and we're not in April. What accounts for doing so many bills to his desk so much more quickly this year?
I think part of it's so many of them had gone through the process last year during COVID, and so we still had to start from ground zero because of the new legislature. But I think that probably accounts a lot for it. I think the fact that our floor leader and her team assigned every bill before start of session got us going quicker this year. We didn't have the lag time you normally have in the first week of session. We continued that tradition when House bills came over. There was not the same amount of lag time. And we're just really awesome at our jobs. So.
That was Sean's thought last night.
Yeah, I figured as much.
That was your thought last night.
I wanted to follow up on a budget question. Has there been any other concrete decisions made on funding Medicaid expansion? I know we got an update from Senator Thompson a couple days ago, but it was really just kind of talking about not federal funding that's coming from stimulus funding. So I'm wondering if you've heard anything concrete.
So there's a better match for states who had not yet expanded Medicaid, and we're in that awkward gap phase, which we're actually going to be it's going to benefit us, beneficiaries of. But it's not sustainable, just like I talked about making sure revenue and expenditures are sustainable. We can use that higher match on this year, but we've got to find a way long-term, and SHOP has to be part of that conversation. Going to the 4% on SHOP is absolutely part of the conversation that has to happen. The very people around the state who pushed the hardest to get Medicaid expansion and who will benefit the most off Medicaid expansion are the hospitals. And so SHOP has to be a part of that conversation. For the short term, some of those federal monies will help offset some of the state dollars needed, but we've got to have a long-term sustainable course developed. I don't want to wait 2 years to come up with the long-term funding source. So you'll see us talking about SHOP quite a bit.
Have the hospitals, are they open to that in the conversation that you all have had?
They signed off on a plan last year. They're not as much there right now.
We've got a question from a remote participant.
Let me be fair to them too. I apologize. The situation has changed too. I was a little bit flippant toward them. The situation they were talking about last year was that whatever the Sooner Care Plus or the deal that fell apart at the end. But they've shown a willingness to do it in the past. They're the ones that requested SHOP in the first place. I voted against SHOP in 2011 and 12. But in order to fund it, we're going to have to use some of those dollars.
All right, go ahead.
Senator, we missed this earlier, but what was the context of that message that you played? Also, what's the future of those two bills? Will they be heard in the Senate? And why was it HB 2335 heard in the Senate today?
What was his first part? I had the voicemail, but
It was in the con.
Sorry, the first part was, what was the context behind that voicemail? And what's the future of those two bills? Will they be heard in the Senate? HB 1236 and 1237.
oh, okay. Yeah, the context was 1236. So people who had received inflammatory calls to action sometimes do irrational things, and sometimes they harm people. And luckily, this was just words, but it was words that if they thought it was going to cause me to change my opinion, I don't get intimidated and I don't get bullied. And so that was one of a myriad of voicemails, just the same, from people both in this building and outside this building stoking those flames of hatred. And so that was 1236. 1236 has already passed. We passed it amended by myself. I took over authorship, a friendly takeover. Senator Daniels agreed to that. But the 1236 we amended, and we actually put real teeth in it, and $50 million over 5 years, $10 million a year from corporate income tax to fund a division at the Attorney General's office to actively fight back against infringements on state powers. And so that is passed. It's over in the House, and they can accept amendments and send it to the governor's desk today if they wanted to. And then 1237, there's not even a procedural way unless we jump through a bunch of hoops to suspend rules and suspend the Constitution and suspend all disbelief to get that heard this year. It would be eligible next year.
Can I ask, obviously you said that you believe that bill to be unconstitutional, House Bill 1236, but there are complaints from other sides of the aisle and, outside observers that say the legislature, not constantly, but sometimes passes clearly unconstitutional legislation. So, you took a principled stand on one thing, but then other bills go through the chamber that appear to be unconstitutional.
So since I've taken over, that's not been the case. Since I've taken over, if I believe something is inherently on its face unconstitutional, I've not given it a hearing. Or we've substantially changed it. Believe me, it would be much easier politically for me to let 1236 go to the governor's desk as is, beg him to sign it, and know the courts are going to throw it out. But to give people false hope is not what I'm here for. To give people who are fearful, both legitimately and both stoked up through social media and other forms, is not healthy to our republic. The attitude and the fear and the hatred that I'm seeing over this and things like Senate Bill 13 and Senate Bill 495 and those bills that are patently unconstitutional, but people outside who have groups that fundraise continually on Facebook off of their messages of hate, they're eerily reminiscent. We just not celebrated, but remembered the 26th anniversary of April 19th. And that same type of hatred and fear that the government is out to get you and the federal government is going to use the state as an instrument of their evil empire. Yes, the federal government is overreached, and I'm going to push back at every turn I can. But I'm not going to fuel people's fears and make people paranoid to go out and live their life. We still live in the greatest country on the face of the planet. We have people who sell advertising on radio shows, sell advertising on Facebook and Twitter that make a living off making people fear for their lives and for their freedom. We always have to zealously guard the flame of liberty, but to give people false hope, to pass things that they know when you talk to them will not be held up in court, but it will make a really good press release, is not the way I will govern when I'm pro tem, and it's not the way I have. and it's not the way I will allow it to happen in the future. So to say that I've allowed unquestionable, unconstitutional things through is a complete misstatement. I have been very consistent. Now, there may be things that eventually don't stand up for some nuanced reason, but if there is a clear violation, I took an oath to uphold the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution, and I take that oath very seriously.
Have you had this conversation with Speaker McCall, Governor Stitt? Do you feel like you have the support in that position, or are you a little frustrated that 80 members sent over that bill? And it sounds like you said when you speak to people privately, they admit that they know it is not necessarily constitutional.
If you read the history of nullification, which I can send you some articles if you'd like, the University of Chicago, I read a 30-page abstract on the study on Monday night. It's had a history of being nothing but empty promises. Now, there are two instances that I've found in my research that it was used for good. And the rest of the time it's been used to suppress people, to discriminate against people, to keep people that you don't want in your schools out of your schools, to keep people that don't look like you from voting. It has a sad history. The people will push back and say, well, Jefferson and Madison in the Virginia resolution said it was a great opportunity. What they were talking about was interposition, and they both recanted later in their life. Jefferson, as president, actually fought back against the nullification after he had said it was a legitimate use. And then Madison, now the people who want to feed you a bunch of lies and try to convince you of an alternative history will say that this is not true, but Madison in his later years completely recanted his support for nullification when he saw the misuses of it. People will say he was senile. It's revisionist history. The conversations I've had with the Speaker and Governor, I've been very clear about my position. Senate Bill 13, I've been extremely clear on that with them. And when I say Senate Bill 13, I just mean the abolitionist-like bills that are nullification. There's different bill numbers on them now, 495, I think. Gotten good support on that. This 1236, obviously the Speaker believes in it. I mean, you saw his comments, and he doesn't agree with my position on it, but just because somebody doesn't agree with the truth doesn't mean it's not the truth.
Barbara asked if you would address how the Supremacy Clause plays in the state's effort to push back against federal overreach.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Barbara. The Supremacy Clause is only as good as that the federal government is acting within their duties as lined out in the Constitution. So to the extent that they're acting outside of those enumerated powers, we can push back, and we can push back successfully. Indeed, we have in the past. Indeed, private companies in Oklahoma, Hobby Lobby, pushed back against the federal overreach, along with others, during the Affordable Care Act. Scott Pruitt, as Attorney General, did this continuously, with some success and with some failure. Mike Hunter has done an excellent job pushing back where he can. But the Supremacy Clause, if you're a true believer in the Constitution, you can't shred the Constitution while trying to say you're upholding the Constitution. And I believe the Supremacy Clause is valid. I mean, it's obviously valid. It's within the Constitution. It's been upheld over 200 years. The issue where a conservative like myself, who does believe in state powers and state sovereignty, will tell you that a lot of times the federal government says, no, it's federal law, trumps state law, but their federal law is not within the enumerated powers. The right recourse for that, though, is not a body of 48 and a body of 101 across the rotunda to declare it unconstitutional. That's the role of the court. Our role is to fight back through appropriations, to fight back through getting the Attorney General engaged, fighting back through lawsuits of our own. We cannot defend the Constitution by seeking to nullify or by trying to act as if we're the judicial branch.
I think the last one we have time for, so before it's out waiting. Someone asked the status of HB 2335.
2335 did not get heard today, so it missed its deadline, and and will not be advancing this session.
I think that's it.
All right, thank you.